You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for having this important hearing today. And I do want to thank all of you for being here today and offering some possible solutions to sort of tightening up the program, making sure that we don't have waste, fraud, and abuse. But I do want to emphasize Mr. Dannenberg's first point, which I think was tread lightly. This is something I just think we have to be very, very careful that we continue to have the program that provides access to these low-income students. When we all want to wring out waste, fraud, and abuse. We all want to make sure that these folks are held accountable, that they're not taking advantage of the system. We've all heard stories about that in the past. Myself, many members here have heard me talk about how I grew up in poverty myself. I had a single mother, parent who had an 11th grade education. Like you, Mr. Dannenberg, first-generation college student. I wouldn't have been able to get to college had it not been for my friends, actually, who came from different family situations and took all this very seriously. So I sort of determined what I was going to do based in no small measure on my relationships with my friends. But I was able to take advantage of programs like this to go to Iowa State University. The last thing I want to see is these programs be eviscerated in one way or another. So I think it's important that we do tread lightly, that we keep in mind what the ultimate goal here is, and that is to make sure that students who don't always have the most advantageous backgrounds have access to a college education, not only for their own sake, but for the sake of our country, for the sake of the competitiveness of the United States of America. I think we have to keep that big picture in mind as well. And also, we've talked a little bit about the skills gap. The community colleges, we all know, are extremely important in this country. In the state of Iowa, the governor and others have quite rightly pointed out and identified the skills gap and how community colleges are going to be very important in educating folks so that they can get into those mid-level skilled jobs. And community colleges are absolutely critical on that front as far as I'm concerned. I taught at a small college, Cornell College, for 24 years. Important college in terms of educating folks, but community colleges really are the key. I call them the intersection, if you will, between education and workforce development, the principal, not the only, but the principal intersection. So we have to be careful also that we not so restrict the environment out there for these students who want to go to these community colleges. I understand we have to tighten it up, but we have to be very careful too that we tread lightly. And I just have one question for you, Mr. Dannenberg. You mentioned on page 3 of your testimony that your written testimony that you lament the fact that the year-round Pell Grant program, something that I championed, as a matter of fact, a number of years ago, that's gone by the wayside in no small measure to try to restrain the costs of the Pell Grant program. Can you talk to us a little bit about the effects of that, because you mentioned it kind of in passing more than anything else on page 3?
Sure. I think, first of all, the institutions that are affected more than any other institution by ending what has been called second Pell or summer Pell are community colleges and historically black colleges and universities in particular. And the situation is that a number of students are coming in underprepared academically. 40-odd% are having to take at least one developmental course. So before they get the credit-bearing work, they're having to learn at the post-secondary level what they were supposed to be exposed to in high school, which is why we should have a college career-ready course of study for all students at the high school level. But because they are behind, they are then behind at the end of their first year. They're not on track to graduate on time. So what was happening over the summer, and it was expensive because this affects so many students, is that they were catching up. So that when they began their second year, they were actually going to be second-year students instead of a second-year student who has only 14 credits and is really, in effect, a first-year student, or 12 credits. Second Pell or summer Pell was having an access impact, particularly at community colleges and historically black colleges and universities, and they are hurting as a result of its reduction, not to mention the needy students who are affected.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for your testimony, and thanks for indulging me. I normally don't take up this much of the 5 minutes with my own speech, if you will, but I do think it's really, really critical that we keep in mind that we have to have a balanced approach here and that we have to tread lightly and that we cannot cut these programs. to the bone, where it's actually going to deprive students who are willing to take the initiative and the personal responsibility, which I think we all value, to invest themselves in these programs so that they can be better students, so they can be better citizens. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr.